Right, so the results are rather conclusive, and they indicate that the best weapon to use between Hellfire and Revoker is dependent on the range that you plan to use it at. And this is fairly obvious, but there are a few notes to make, as well as a couple other things. First off, I do want to mention Hellfire does have the highest damage potential, but Revoker obviously will do a lot faster damage at the closer ranges. And Revoker has two things that work against it at range. There is the fire rate that slows the number of projectiles you can throw. But what it also has is projectile damage fall off. Outside of optimal range, Revoker is dealing less physical damage per projectile. So even if you hit the target the same number of times, a 30-meter hit is going to deal less damage than a 5-meter hit. You can largely mitigate this with the range implant. The range implant does nothing to projectile speed, but the range implant will significantly reduce the amount of damage fall off that it has at around 30 meters, and you can see this with the Revoker 16s toward the end of the test. Suffice it to say, if you compare the time difference from the Revoker 16 at 5 meters and 30 meters, you'll notice that the time difference is like actually not crazy versus the time difference between the 12s without the range implant at 5 meters versus 30 meters. At 5 meters, the range implant doesn't come into play whatsoever, but it does at 30 meters, not because you're outside of range, not because it makes the projectiles go faster, but because you lose less damage from the fall off. And so that's going to help you a bit there. And so you might conclude that it's like kind of 50-50, that they're about the same, pros and cons to each one. But I would say the rather conclusive winner is actually Revoker. And the reason is that there are very few situations or very few mechs where you would actively want a very, very limited range weapon, but you actively would not be capable of getting super close. Like a dash mech or a seeker or something like that, everything that you would want a really close range weapon on can close distance extremely quickly and can make sure that it gets within that 5 meters or even less than that to be able to use a Revoker better than it could do with Hellfire. The only real exception I can think of is maybe Blizzfrost or possibly Deathwalker, where those mechs are not super fast. Maybe Citadel as well, I suppose. Those mechs are not super fast, and so they will benefit from just having better reach, but at the same time, you're probably better off just not using those mechs with such limited ranged weapons. You should probably use them with weapons that can at least reach a little further than that. And so in that regard, I would say, generally speaking, Revoker is the better close quarters weapon because, I mean, it does better at the closest range, as well as being able to more easily counter like blockade type mod shields, though it does suffer a bit from galvanic hull, but it's not a huge deal all in all. But I do think it is a good way to show you guys like just how bad Revoker does at any type of range. And this is why you really shouldn't even attempt to use it at any type of range. If you're using Revoker on anything that's even a little bit slow to where enemies could run away from you, you have 30 meters maximum range technically, but your DPS tanks significantly. It's like a massive DPS drop from 5 meters to 30 meters. And I think a lot of people know that intuitively, but they don't really exactly understand just how much of a DPS drop it is, and it's very, very significant. The argument to be made for Hellfire is that its status effect damage will continue to deal damage even after it is gone. So even though you are dealing less damage in the moment, you will continue to deal damage a bit afterward. And so, you might be tanking your damage slightly, but let's say you die with it and you end up getting the kill anyway with your burn status effect. And that's true, but just dealing damage faster causes you to take less damage, and it allows you to chain together multiple kills more often. So like 1 versus 1, Hellfire's more likely to secure a single kill, but a Revoker is more likely to kill quicker, meaning that it is more likely to be able to chain multiple kills together. And I think that's more valuable than just being able to, more assuredly secure a single kill. But anyway, yeah, My takeaway would generally be that Revoker is still the better one on almost everything that you'd normally use close range weapons on, but Hellfire would be the slightly more ideal choice weapon for possibly like Deathwalker, Citadel, and Blizzfrost. Not that those should use really low range weapons, but between the two, Hellfire probably is going to be better on those three, and really only those three. That's just my thoughts. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. Otherwise, that will be it for me. Appreciate y'all. Take care.